Hello, and welcome to this year's Desktop Monitoring Instrument Training for the school year 2024-25. The DMI platform is where LEAs that receive Title I funding demonstrate annually how they meet various requirements of the statute. My name is Val Murdoch, and I am the Utah State Board of Education Title I Monitoring Specialist. And I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this step-by-step training, as it will save you time and it will also save me time, since you'll probably do things correctly and I won't have to send anything back. There are multiple levels of support when completing the DMI. This training is just one of those supports. Below this video, you'll notice that there are lots of timestamps. Those timestamps allow you to navigate quickly and efficiently from item to item, and give you the ability to skip over items that don't pertain to your particular LEA. So charter LEAs, this will really save you a lot of time, and for districts, it will save you some time. For those of you who are more experienced in the DMI, perhaps you only need to go to the particular items that are listed as new on the update sheet. And I'll show you that update sheet in just a second. But all you need to do is click on the timestamp of the item that you want to go to. Another thing to notice is the settings gear. And in that settings gear, you're able to change the playback speed. Some of you have a very fast processing, auditory processing, and so you could speed it up to 1.5 or twice as fast to be able to get the information at a speed that works for you. Besides this training, other supports include a live, well, at least a live Zoom for all new Title I directors that are participating in the new Title I directors cohort. That is scheduled to happen on October 22nd. And if needed, we can shift that to September 11th, when we were going to talk about the Title I application in Utah grants, just in case that Title I application isn't open by September 11th. So I will keep you posted so you'll know whether it's September 11th or October 22nd. Another support is after our regularly scheduled Title I directors meeting on September 27th, I will hold office hours where you can come and ask specific questions. That assumes that you've watched this video. It assumes that you've gone into the DMI and you've run into something that you have a question about, or you've been challenged, you can't figure something out. And so September 27th, after the meeting, so that's probably going to be around noonish, earlier or later, depending on when it ends. I will answer those specific questions. And then there's also a DMI handout update of the updates for this year. And of course, you can always call and email me in advance. Earlier in October or November, the better. This is the update sheet that accompanied the link that I sent out in the email. And this may or may not make much sense to you. This is probably more helpful for those of you who have completed the DMI several times, but the top section can be very useful to everyone. Notice that the due date is December 1st. That's every single year. It doesn't change from year to year. And this year, that date might pose a problem because you can't leave it until December 1st. December 1st is a Sunday that follows Thanksgiving weekend. And so in your mind, you need to think the due date is November 27th, unless you're planning to work through that weekend for some reason. The URL to access the DMI login page is listed. Our IT department did some updates to the DMI. And so if you bookmark the link and it's not working, use this link to access the DMI. This next section can save you a lot of time and headache There are 3 steps to follow in order to prevent most problems in the DMI. The first one is to answer all the criteria questions, leaving no item marked none. They all come pre-populated with the answer as none. What happens if you leave one or more of the criteria questions answered as none, you'll never be able to submit it. So no submit button will appear. So you need to answer the question either yes or no. The second step to follow to prevent those problems is to click save after everything. Most of the time the button says save, sometimes it says attach, and other times it says, let's see, what else does it say? Update. And the third step is just because you click that submit button when you're all finished and you're ready to send it to me, just because you click submit doesn't mean you're finished. You need to click it twice. You click submit and then you click the button to confirm, yes, I really did mean to submit it. Every year, there's at least one LEA that submits one part of the DMI, but not another. And I can see they went in and uploaded documentation to it. So I have to call them and say, hey, I think you forgot to click submit twice. So make sure that you click twice, and then I'll also show you where you can see the status of the submission. There are instructions for how to access forms, add links, and upload documents. And those are also within the content of each of the items as well. I do want to just bring your attention to some highlighting code. I don't have the color code listed on here, although the yellow highlighted one right here states that any highlighted item may require you to wait a little while or maybe a lot of while in order to access the data you need to upload to the DMI. And one of those things is the 2023-24 LEA report card. Item 1 on the annual core requires you to link on your LEA website to your LEA report card. And because USBE does not have those published to the public yet, you cannot link to the report card until those are released. I don't have any notice of when that will happen this year. I know last year it got delayed and it didn't happen until the end of October. But you can still go on and respond to all the other items that you can while you're waiting for the report cards to be published. Red color code means that either there's been a change to that item, and so those of you who are more experienced, maybe you just look at this list, look for the things that have been changed, and then go to the timestamps on the training video and just watch those items. Blue just happens to list some of the resources that are available for each of those items in the DMI under the resource tab. And the last thing I want to bring to your attention is, it's a pretty lengthy document, is that if you have any problems logging in or any questions, you can contact our Executive Secretary, Becky Peters. Her email and phone number are right here. If you have content questions about the annual core or cycle 1, you can call or email me as well. And this information, this contact information is listed, mine anyway, not Becky's, is listed on every single DMI item. So if you get stuck on one item, my contact information is right there for you to see. When you go to log in in the DMI, if it's your first time, then you need to accept the invitation. When I or Becky create a new user account, it automatically generates an email and sends it to you a code that you use when you create your login. If you have created a login, but you forgot what your password was, then you can reset your own password right there instead of reaching out to Becky. There's also DMI Help Desk, and you can email that, but essentially Becky just goes in and checks that email. So for the fastest response, make sure to email Becky or me if you have login questions. Okay, I have my information posted and I'm ready to log in. When you log in, you'll be taken directly to your LEA instead of having to choose from a list of LEAs. First thing you might notice is that there are two parts to the DMI, an annual core and a cycle. And so we'll do the annual core, talk about that first, and then we'll do the cycle. Annual core items stay relatively the same, although this year there is a new one for districts about equitable services. And cycles, there are 4 cycles that we rotate through, so that kind of breaks up the number of items that you're having to respond to each year. Another thing that you might notice is this green, the tabs along this green line. The only 2 that are really important is this overview tab and the LEA file cabinet. When you click on the file cabinet, if you've uploaded anything, any documents as evidence, they will be listed here. So you can see what you've uploaded this year. You can change the year and go back to previous years in order to see what you or your predecessor uploaded. So that the filing cabinet can be helpful. And the LEA overview just allows you to navigate back to this main page. Let me show you how to change the year. I'm going to need to make this a little smaller so we can access that. So select the school years in the upper right-hand corner, and I can change that to last year, update that, and I can go see in the file cabinet. Well, I didn't use this one last year as the example, so it doesn't have any files. But if you changed the year to last year, you would be able to see everything that was uploaded for cycle 4 and for the annual core. Make sure, though, if you've changed the year, that you change it back to the current one so that you can proceed. Okay, starting with the annual core items, we're taken directly to those criteria questions. It's really important to answer these correctly. Otherwise, you may be presented with more items than you need to. If you're a charter LEA serving a single site, you're going to answer yes to number 1, no to number 2, and no to number 3. You can only answer one of these, 1, 2, or 3. If you are a charter LEA with more than one site, so you have satellites, then you're going to answer 2 yes, 1 and 3 no. Now, every year, there are a couple of charter LEAs that answer yes to 3. Yes, we're a district, and I understand why you answer that way. However, if you answer yes to 3, you're going to be presented with private school items that have nothing to do with charters. Charters don't have to worry about providing equitable services to charter or to private schools. So make sure to answer 2 yes and 3 no. And of course, if you're a district, you answer 1 and 2 no and 3 yes. Did you consult with any private schools regarding equitable services for Title I? Charters, you're going to make sure you answer that no. Districts, you're only going to answer that yes if you actually met with the private school to talk about equitable services. If you sent them a notice, hey, you might be eligible for equitable services, that's not consulting with them. That's just inviting them. So make sure you're answering this correctly. Every year, some districts that have never met with private schools because the private schools were not interested in meeting with them answer this one yes, and then they don't have any documentation to upload for that item. And then again, charters, you're going to answer 5 no because it has to do with private schools. Districts, only if you actually are providing services to private school students do you need to answer this yes. Maybe you consulted with them, and then when they realized they only qualified for $1,000 worth of equitable services, they said, no thanks. And so you would answer that, no, you don't provide those services. So most of you will mark that no, but there are several districts that will mark that yes. And then 6 is probably going to be marked yes for almost all LEAs, charters, and districts, because most of you choose to use Title I funds to pay the salaries of employees. Okay. Now, for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to answer all yeses, just so all items upload. Make sure to save. Remember, that's one of our prevention problems, our problem preventions. And then you'll be taken to the instrument overview, and you can see that how many of the items meet requirements and how many are in progress. So 14 of them are in progress. That's the most you'll be presented with. Charters, you'll be probably be presented with maybe more like 6 or 7. So there's our criteria questions tab in case we need to change it again. And we can expand all items by clicking on the window, but just notice that there are 4 different categories, and under each of those categories are 1 or more items. Another thing to notice on this instrument overview page is on the far right of each instrument or each item, the status of that item is listed. All of them are still in progress. In order to get that submit button at the end, all of these must be changed to a different status. None of them can be left in progress, just like none of the criteria questions can be left none. Let's get into that first item by just clicking on that. And I know this looks really busy. This item is kind of complicated, so I tried adding additional instructions which makes it look really busy. But look for the headings so that you can start seeing a pattern, so you can access the information that's most helpful to you. The first section is always the required action. What do you need to do? Do you need to upload something? Do you need to just make an assurance that your LEA is compliant with this? If there are any special notes, they're listed. Then there are upload instructions if you need to upload something. This particular item has an option A and an option B just because of the way the statute is written. And there are additional resources under the resource tab. So make sure if you're a little confused about what the item is about, or you just want more information, you go to the resources tab at the bottom of the page. So let's look at what this is requesting. The required action is to post your LEA's 2023-24 report card. Remember, those are not yet available to your LEA's website. So what does that mean? You're going to upload a working URL where parents and the public can access that report card on your LEA website. If you want specific examples, instructions, see the resources tab for step-by-step information. I'm also going to give you some examples so you can see. And if needed, you're going to provide additional instructions in the LEA comment box below to help me, because remember, I'm doing 135 of these, so it really helps me to, if you give me instructions, if the link doesn't take me directly to the page on your website where the report card is posted. And I'll give you one example of where an LEA has done that for me. So almost 100% of the LEAs that submitted item 1 last year had a website, so nobody exercised option B, and that's only if you don't have a website. The citation is always listed at the bottom, so you can see why we're asking you for this information. So let me show you a few examples, and I know I shared this at the new Title I directors as well as our new Title I directors cohort, but I will share one new website with you that you haven't seen, except for last year in the video. So Murray's has just a Utah School Report Card under Parents. So they navigate themselves. They go to Utah School Report Card. And then this is the URL that they're going to copy and paste when they go to upload the evidence. But I do want to show you, when I click on that, I'm taken to the most recent report card, which is nice. Notice up here that URL ends in 2023. My theory is it's going to be the same URL, except it'll be 2024. Now that I'm not 100% on that one. I would like it to actually land on the performance page, since that's what most people are looking for when they're searching the report card. So make it as user-friendly as you can. They can always access their school's report cards by scrolling all the way to the bottom of the page. Now, Murray adds some additional information. You can locate other school districts by clicking here. So just in case you wanted to see how our district compared to other districts, you can search on your own. Now, I don't want this link to be the only link. I don't want to have parents have to actually search for your LEA. So Murray kind of went above and beyond by adding that link, but this first one is the one that shows me that they're in compliance. And another thing that they added, and this is in the resources tab, is the FAQ that the assessment and the data and assessment department put out 2 years ago to help parents and family members understand a little bit more about the report card. And it's still fairly applicable to that. Another example of an LEA that went a little above and beyond is Entheos Academy. All they need to do is have their LEA Overview posted, and you can see that it's the most recent year, and it lands on the performance page, which is great. They went above and beyond because they have their 2 campuses also posted, so that makes it even easier for parents to find exactly how their school is doing. And the third one, the one that is a little more complicated, you can't just upload the URL, you have to add directions, is North St. Pete School District. So I know, because they added this information, that I need to go to the About tab and then click on School Report Card. Now, because this takes me directly to the report card, I can't upload this link because it doesn't show me North St. Pete's website. So what I need to do is I need to go one step back, and I'm going to have to put this link in, and just the link to their website. So I copy that, go to the All Documents tab at the bottom of the page, and look for the plus sign and the attached document link. It's pre-populated to uploading a file. Well, we're not uploading a file on this one. We want to link to a web page URL. So I just cut and pasted North St. Pete's, the link to their website. I'm going to put in here North St. Pete School District Report Card. And then remember, I need to save, but this time the save button is attach. When I do that, I can come down to the bottom and see, yes, indeed, it did attach. And I can even open that to make sure, oh, good, it opened to the right page. If I go to the LEA file cabinet, I can see that it's there. And the comments are what I really want you to focus on. If your report card is kind of hard to get a link for because it's in a drop-down menu, put notes in the comment box so I can find it. So on the North St. Pete School District landing page, click on the About drop-down menu. The report card is the second to last link. Oh, that's so helpful. That saves me so much time. The last thing you need to do on an item is to change that status. North St. Pete if this were the 23-24 school year report card, they would be in compliance. And you can't link to the 2023-24, or excuse me, 22-23 report card and be in compliance this year. Okay. I need to make sure I save that status, and I have the comment saved. And so I'm ready to go on to the next item. This one is evaluation of family engagement. And I forgot on the last one, but you can tell an upload is needed in a few different ways. One is a red box appears with how many uploads are required. Two, you have some screaming capital letters. And three, under the required actions. So under the required actions for this self-assessment is you need to complete the evaluation of family engagement self-assessment found under the resources tab. Now, last year, there were a couple of LEAs that for some reason forgot this was an annual requirement and then uploaded a bunch of documentation that I didn't even ask for. And so I had to send it back just because they didn't read this part and because they didn't go to the resources tab to find the document to fill out. There are upload instructions in case you need those, and there are additional resources. I did want to go back to the previous item just because I forgot. In the previous item, the additional resources for the report card are that FAQ in case you want to post it to your website. There are step-by-step instructions for posting that LEA report card on your website. And then there is just a link to that Utah School Report Card search page. So sometimes the resources are helpful, sometimes they may not be helpful to you. Okay, back to the evaluation of family engagement. Every year, every single LEA must evaluate its parent and family engagement policy and practices. That's a big ask, but it's a big part of the statute too. So in order to support LEAs in meeting that statute, I created a rubric. So in order to find that rubric, I need to look for the annual evaluation of family engagement. And then I tried to distinguish it from the others by saying complete and upload this self-assessment. So I download it by clicking on download. And then I happen to have one filled out. Starting at the top, make sure to fill in the name of the person who completed the self-assessment. So since I have a pretend LEA, I'm calling it sample LEA. Now on this one, unlike the report card, well, kind of like the report card because it's last year's data, we're reflecting on last year's school year since we want to evaluate it. So I've broken down the statute into 7 components. And then the different levels of the rubric are, this particular component is not yet in place. It's an emerging practice, an established practice, or we have innovative implementation. And as I always say on this one, if you're doing something innovative and you mark it on here, I may reach out to you to find out what you're doing so I can share it with other LEAs. Notice on my sample LEA, we do have a lot of established practices, but we do have 2 areas where we still have an emerging practice. Okay. Now, as I proceed to the second page, you'll notice that I changed the prompts just slightly from last year. I really want you to start paying attention to what the statute requires. So we're still doing the glow and the grow, but this year I really want you to hone in on which component your LEA is doing well and which component you want to grow and improve in. So the one that I said we're doing well in is the LEA and school personnel strategically collect and analyze data to determine the needs of parents and family members to engage with school personnel and teachers. I believe that's the, let's see, oh, that's the second one. So all I did was cut that and paste it in. And then I need to add some supporting context. We conducted parent and family focus groups at all 4 of our Title I schools in May. We added new questions focused on the type of training or information parents and family members felt would be most helpful to build their capacity to support their children at home. The responses indicated parents needed additional help with math, especially in the upper grades, and with reading in the lower grades. This valuable information will allow us to tailor the supports offered to families. Okay, and the next one is an area of growth. And I cut and pasted this. LEA and school personnel use the findings of annual evaluation to design evidence-based strategies for more effective family engagement and to revise, if necessary, the engagement policies. Well, on number 3, I'm going to present a plan or an idea that we've tossed around, or maybe we've created a goal that we want to address our area of growth. We will do a book study with our principals in their PLC on effectively engaging parents and family members. During this year-long study, each school community will select 1 or more evidence-based strategies to implement. So once you have that ready, you're going to go to the All Documents tab, look for that plus sign and the link to attach documents. This time it is a file. So I'm going to choose my file, which I always keep all of mine in a file, but for some reason it's flipped to something completely different. There's my self-assessment. Now, it does automatically title it. Now, I don't know if that's just for me because I've practiced this and it's remembering it, or if it will do that for you too. The description is optional. I put it in the resources so that you can get more information about what each resource is about, but it's not required. And then don't forget to attach it. And when I come down to the bottom, I can see that Word document has been uploaded. And I'm ready to, no, I'm not. I need to change the status from in progress to meets requirements. Even if you put on, whoops, I just realized I hadn't reshared my screen showing the DMI. So I'll start right here, changing the status to meets requirements and saving that. This item doesn't require any comments. And I'll review that all documents. So going down to the all documents to upload it, I look for the plus sign, attach it, choose the file, click that, add it, and attach. I may now have 2. I do have 2 since I uploaded it without showing you, and now I just showed you that. Okay, since I already changed the status, I'm ready to click next. The annual Title I meeting. The required actions, and LEAs have gotten so much better on this item. I am sending fewer and fewer back. Thank you so much for understanding that there are specific requirements of that annual meeting. So whatever you upload, it needs to show enough detail that I can see that all 4 of these items have been met by that school level Title I meeting. If you have multiple campuses, if you have multiple Title I schools, then you just need to upload the meeting evidence from 1 school. You can definitely upload from more than 1 school if you would like. You need to show, or the school needs to show, but then you need to make sure that they have shown that they invited and encouraged all parents to attend the meeting. This is the best area of improvement. There were probably 3 years ago, there were not a lot of districts, but some districts that were presenting this information in their school community councils and saying, well, we invited all parents, but the fact that the SEC really isn't built as a meeting for all parents to attend, then it's really not the best situation to present this information. You could certainly do it as a separate meeting. Hey, this is our information about Title I this year, but all parents need to be invited and encouraged to a meeting for that Title I information. There were several charter charters that were years ago presenting it just to their board. Well, it's the parents and family members that need this information, not just the board. So thank you for improving in that area. During the meeting, these 3 items need to be discussed. Information on how the school participates in Title I Part A, what Title I is, and how the school utilizes Title I funds. The school needs to explain what the requirements of Title I are. Family engagement is a huge part of it. We have an engagement policy, and this is what it covers, and this is where you can find it. And we have a school family compact, and this is what just the high level overview of what the compact is, and also where you can find it. A lot of schools include it in their back to school packet and ask that parents read that. Now, you know how those back to school packets get. 1,000 pages later, nobody's really looked at the compact. So it's nice in that meeting to actually bring it to their family's attention. And if you're in an elementary school, introducing this during parent-teacher conferences might be a really nice way. In fact, in the statute, it actually mentions parent-teacher conferences for elementary schools. The last one is to explain the rights of the parents to be involved. Under the resources tab, there is a handout of the required topics and suggested tips. If you want to get more information about that, you can download that. I have included 2 exemplar slideshows, and I'm going to just show you Greenwood's right now. I'm going to use Greenwood's actually to upload. So I'll go to all documents, attach document. I'll add that slideshow in there, attach, and then to show you what it looks like. So one thing I like that Greenwood does is they have the year. I would like it to actually have the actual date or dates if you offer this meeting multiple times of when it was held. I have had several LEAs upload a school's detailed agenda or PowerPoint, and it's from the previous year. They didn't even change the date. So that kind of tells me that the school really wasn't taking things seriously, didn't notice, or really didn't even present to the parents the information. You notice their slide, it's just one slide. They get participation in Title I done, but they also go into a little more detail about how Greenwood uses Title I funds. They get really specific about using Title I funds on reading skills in grades K through 3. They also talk about most of their funding going to staffing and how students are supported, as well as the assessments that they use. That's one of the rights parents have to know about the assessments. Then they have a high-level overview of family engagement, those requirements of Title I, and go into a little more detail on the following slides, as well as linking them. Now, if you just show us a PowerPoint in the meeting, obviously parents won't have these links, but if you post this on your website or you include a link in your newsletter, they can access these. And then Greenwood does a nice job giving some of the rights family members have to be involved in the decisions made at the school, to be provided information on their child's achievement, that they have the right to request information on the qualifications of both teachers and any paraprofessionals who work with their children. And they also have the right to request opportunities for regular meetings to talk about the education of their child. They go a little beyond, above and beyond, by adding how can parents and family members be involved, and they give contact information at the end. So really nicely done. You can see it's short slides. If you want, you can add in your school goals, just one slide that shows what you're focused on this year and how Title I is supporting those goals. That makes it more meaningful to families. Giving them boring definitions and saying things like, we can't supplement or can't supplant, we have to supplement, that doesn't mean much to families. So think of ways to make the information more meaningful. Okay, I have that uploaded, so the last thing I need to do is change the status to meets requirements. And off to item 39 begins a series of 4 private school questions. So if you're a charter LEA, the next 4 questions have nothing to do with you. You can skip to the timestamp for item 43, maintenance of effort. For all districts, you do need to respond to this. Some districts will respond differently than other districts. So the required action is to upload evidence. The LEA sent notifications to all private nonprofit schools within their boundaries and, if applicable, to those private schools in another district's boundaries that may serve students who reside in your own LEA's boundaries. For instance, in Weber School District, I can't remember where the school is, whether it's in Ogden or Weber, there's a private school that both students from Weber and students from Ogden attend. So both Weber and both Ogden have the requirement to notify that particular private school of their the equitable services available to them. So that's an example of when you would actually look for private schools outside your LEA boundaries. The upload instructions are here. Now, for the rest of the districts that don't have private schools anywhere within their boundaries or anywhere close to their boundaries, after due diligence, so maybe you've gone to the website that's listed under the resources tab, maybe you've done an internet search, you cannot find any private nonprofit schools, you are going to change the status from in progress to not monitored. All the rest will go ahead and upload the documentation, which is can be a screenshot of the emails you sent. It could be the actual letter, copy of the actual letter you sent. It could be maybe you sent the letter, but you didn't hear back from the LEA, so you called them. So it could be a phone log of you following up afterwards. Remember, you need multiple attempts of notifying the private school. So I'll do the all documents and then choose that file. This is my sample letter, and this actually is available under the resource tab. If you want to look at it, feel free to use it, modify it for your needs. But in this letter, I have the date. Notice that it's sent in late winter. So late winter, early spring is a great time to start notifying LEAs. Maybe you don't have the allocation, you don't know how much the equitable service proportionate share is. You could still notify them. We know that the federal government takes its time often in distributing those allocations, agreeing on a budget. Last year, we didn't know until end of April, May. So it is hard to have that, invite them to a consultation when you don't know the dollar amount. But if you save this till summer or fall, then you're not allowing for timely consultation. So the law says timely and meaningful consultation. So the pretend district invites LaSalle Academy to an annual consultation. I noticed in some of your letters you say, we're required to notify you every year, kind of like, sorry, we're bugging you again, but really it's not bugging because you're offering them services. And the meeting will be held at the end of April. Please return this by April 5th. If you just want to consult on Title I, then you can leave these other programs out as long as someone else is consulting on them. Most districts find it's more convenient to consult on all title programs, even adding IDEA in there to save time. the contact information. They can email it back. They can send this form back. Notice that it has a fillable form where they can say, yes, we're interested. We can or can't meet on that particular day. No, we're not interested. We have questions. We want to talk before we consult. And you can tailor that to whatever you think is important to both you and the private school. So let me share the other screen. And I can see that it is uploaded. And the last thing I need to do is change that status. But before I do, let me show you the resources that are available in case you have never looked under this Items Resource tab. There's a calculator for calculating equitable, the amount of proportionate share for equitable services. Also, the amount of parent-family engagement from that proportionate share. And then the set aside for administering the equitable services, which I'll get into in item 41. So how to prove nonprofit status. There's information related to Edgar. Indiana's calendar for equitable services. So they did a nice job outlining what it looks like over the course of a year, what you would be doing with the private schools. Here's a private school search. It's not comprehensive, but it can get you started. I also, in the description, gave you some directions to search. Sample invitation to consult on multiple ESEA programs. That's the letter that I shared with you. And I have it in PDF and Word, but I also have just consultation for Title I in PDF and Word. And then, of course, there's always the non-regulatory guidance put out by the federal government. It's been updated recently, so if you have questions, you can take a look at that non-regulatory guidance. So when you're ready, you can change that to meets requirements. Of course, if you don't have, well, if you answered the question yes, number 4, and you never consulted with them, you need to go back to the criteria question and change it so you're not forced to upload something here. Every year I get 2 or 3 districts that try to upload something here when they never consulted. Oh, we're still on notification, sorry. Talking about the next one already. For those of you who don't have private schools, remember you're going to change that to not monitored. And save. And now let's go on to the consultation. So if the private school, after receiving that notice, is interested and wants to meet with you, then you are required to have them sign an affirmation that they consulted and there was timely and meaningful comfort. The consultation was both timely and meaningful. Meaningful meaning that they had the ability to give input, ask questions. They feel like they really had a part in creating this equitable services plan. So you're going to either upload the USBE affirmation of consultation form completed and with the signatures, or your own affirmation of consultation that has all the required ESEA components on that. Just so you know, there are several different versions of the USBE form. There's the multiple ESEA programs. So if you're consulting on more than just Title I, it's available in PDF or Word. And if you're only consulting on Title I, it's available in PDF and Word. That equitable services calculator was added again in here, just so you could use it, showing them how you calculated the proportionate share. And then another link to that same non-regulatory guidance. So I want to upload the affirmation of consultation. This is the one for multiple ESEA programs. It does not have IDEA on it, as that would be completely different questions. So make sure that you change the year and update the contact information for each private school you consult with. This first section is just which title programs does the district receive funding for? Because if you don't receive funding for it, then you don't consult about it. And then which ones out of the ones the district receives an allocation from, which programs are the private schools interested in? So in this particular situation, the LEA was either didn't receive migrant an allocation for migrant ed, or the LE or the private school was not interested in it. So they marked yes for Title I, for Title II, for Title III, no for Title IV Part A, and no for Title IV Part B. So this is more based on what the LEA receives as well as the private school's interest. Just a consultation. It doesn't mean that they're saying, yes, we want to receive the funding. That will come at the end. For Title I, the questions are slightly different than the rest of the titles that fall under Section 8501. So it's just broken down into those two. You ask all the questions, obviously, even if just two of these, Title I and another title, are marked yes. Go through that, create a plan with the answers, and then at the end, after that discussion and consultation, which of the titles will the private school be participating in? And then here's that affirmation of timely and meaningful consultation with the officials' signatures, both the LEA and the private school. I wanted to share with you what the form for just consulting on Title I looks like. So you can see, instead of having that 8501 questions added to the Title I questions, it looks a little less busy on the page. There are no check boxes because both the private school and the LEA are focused just on Title I. And then there's just one box. Yes, we're going to participate in equitable services, or no, we're going to decline this year to participate in equitable services. And again, those signatures are required. Back to the DMI, you can see I've uploaded both of those. You need to upload an affirmation of consultation for each private school you consult with. Change that status. And the next item is that new item that I was talking about. So I get your attention, new item for 2024. This item is necessary because when we attended our summer meetings in Washington, D.C. this year, Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, shared with us that in their recent federal monitoring visit, they had a finding that because their districts were not setting aside an amount to administer the equitable services, then they were not in compliance with the law. So I don't know how many of you set aside an amount to cover the cost of administering that private school equitable services. I have a feeling it's not very many. So for this item, if you, during your consultation, during the winter or spring last year, if you didn't discuss a set aside, then what you're going to do is make an assurance that this coming winter or spring, whenever you consult, you will add it in. Okay, so you can tell the private school, we're going to charge $100 to administer this, whatever you think is fair cost, and that's something that you could discuss with the private school. We need to find staff to provide services. We need to take time to purchase the equipment that you have identified based on your needs. Okay, so there is a cost for you. It takes your time, or it takes somebody else's time at the district to administer that grant. So you need to figure out how much that is. You can, the calculator, I don't know, will help you very much, but it does have let me show you, it does have in the last section. If I make this bigger so you can see it. It has just figuring out what the overall proportionate amount is, then the parent-family engagement, if that pertains to your particular district. And then the last one is, are there any admin costs? Yes. Okay, so yes, there are. This now, from now on, will be yes. So total proportionate share minus the parent and family engagement, that will upload based on your calculations from the first and second sections. Then you're going to minus the LEA the admin costs. So whether it's $200, it's not something where you're trying to get all the money back to the district. It's going to be a fair cost for your time or the staff's time at the district. And then that will give you the total private share after admin costs are deducted, which also include the parent and family engagement. So you might choose to use this calculator just because of that particular section. So you make the assurance, nothing to upload. Again, if you didn't do that last winter or spring, then you assure that you will do that this coming year, then you will be meeting requirements. Okay, so we're done on this one and ready to go to the funding and services. So on this one, all you do is assure the required action is you make an assurance that the equitable services provided to the private school students are determined based on the total amount of funds received by the local education agency. And that's before anything else is taken off the top of it. Remember, equitable services are calculated first. And then the services benefit the eligible students in the private schools compared to the services benefiting the students in the LEA's Title I schools. So their services are comparable. They're not exactly the same because they're based on the needs of the students at the private school. There are additional resources here. Many of them were also resources in previous items. So this is just an assurance. And going on to the next one. Item 43, we should have everyone back on this one. Maintenance of effort. Maintenance of effort has required for the last couple of years that you have made an assurance that you have a MOE policy and procedures. And now our fiscal team is requiring that if you're scheduled for a monitoring visit, that you also demonstrate with evidence how you document the level of state and local funding from year to year. And I'll give you some examples of that in just a second. Maintenance of effort is one of 3 fiscal rules under Title I. So there's maintenance of effort, supplement, not supplant, and comparability. And they all can get pretty confusing because they all have to do with state and local funds, and they have nothing to do with federal funding. The purpose of those 3 fiscal rules are to ensure that the LEA doesn't reduce its own state and local funds and replace those state and local funds with federal funds, so that a Title I school is getting supplemental funds. So they get all the funding they would have received plus additional federal funds. There's nothing that you need to do with this unless you don't have policy and procedures for maintenance of effort. Then you need to create those. And if you're getting an early start in September, you have plenty of time to get those created and hopefully before the board and passed before December. You don't have to upload those, but if you have a monitoring visit, you will be asked for those. Now, let me give you an example of both policy procedures and tracking the amount of state and local funding from year to year and how MOE is calculated. So maintenance of effort overview and calculations is what I'm looking for. So there's an introduction here, and in the introduction, it indicates that to meet the maintenance of effort, let me increase the size here so you can see that a little bit better. Oops. It says to meet the MOE, maintenance of effort requirement, an LEA must spend at least 90% of the state and local funds per pupil or as a whole that it spent in the preceding fiscal year. So in order to calculate this year's MOE, we look at the previous 2 years. Again, I'll show you examples of that. Now, this is why there's been that slight change for those of you who are being monitored and having to show evidence that you track your LEA's MOE. The Utah State Board of Education does calculate MOE for all Utah LEAs every year, and now requires LEAs to annually calculate their own MOE to ensure no unexpected reduction to federal funding. Because if you do not spend at least 90% of the state and local funds from one year to the next, then whatever amount that you are under that 90% is deducted from your federal funding. I believe it's all federal funding and not just, well, all title federal funding, all ESEA federal funding, and not just Title I. So basically the fiscal department, fiscal operations department wants you to be empowered so you know that you are maintaining that effort from year to year. I have included here expenditures to include and those not to include when you're calculating maintenance of effort, and then how it's calculated. It can get a little tricky, but it's actually simple once you get the hang of it. So MOE for last year was based on the 2 previous years. So for last year, we go back to both 2021-22 and 2020-21. So we want the spending, the state and local expenditures from 2021-22 to be at least 90% of the year before it, which was 2020-21. So if that was $7,305.50 per student in 2020-21, and then the next year we spent less, we spent $7,246.03 per student. What is that percentage? Well, 90% of 7,305, remember that third year, that prior year, 2020-21, is 6,574. And so we are above that 90%. So maintenance of effort has been met now for this third year. So you see the third year is what we're looking retrospectively 2 years prior. So if there were a difference and we didn't spend at least 90%, then whatever that overage would be deducted from the current school year. Okay, looking at these 3, there are 3 examples where I show you in some cases where maintenance of effort was met and some cases where it was not met. And I give you both the calculations for the aggregate as well as the per pupil, so you can see that you would take the lesser of the funds to be reduced, or say you don't meet maintenance effort with the aggregate, but you do meet it with the per pupil expenditures, you still meet maintenance of effort, but you have to have a way to track that. So this document is available in the resources. And again, this is just an assurance, but if you don't have that policy procedures or a way of tracking, then you need to get that in place. Changing that to meets requirements and save. And going on to the next fiscal rule, which is supplement, not supplant. That fiscal rule is met by having a methodology which shows how your LEA ensures that Title I schools receive all the state and local funds it would receive if it did not participate in Title I program, if it didn't get Title I funds. Now, your LEA is exempt from doing supplement, not supplant, if you only have one school in the entire LEA, or if you only have all Title I schools. So in the case of San Juan School District, all their schools are Title I schools, so they would not need to have a Title I methodology. Obviously, going back to only one school, single site charters have only one school, so they're exempt from having to have a supplement, not supplant policy. But if you have two Title I schools, then you need to create a Title I school and a non-Title I school, you need to create that methodology. Now, if you have 3 schools, but it's only one elementary, one middle, and one high school, then no methodology is required either, since that the way you allocate funds to an elementary school is much different than the way you allocate funds to a high school. So those are the only 3 exemptions from that methodology. This is an assurance unless one of the following situation has happened in your LEA. If changes have been made to the methodology, then you need to upload the revised methodology. If, since last year, a single site LEA added a campus to become a multi-site LEA, then you need to create a methodology. And then if the LEA is exempt, so they don't meet one of these 2 situations, then they need to indicate in the box below why they are exempt. We only have one school. We have all Title I schools. We only have one K-9 school, and that sounds like a dog school, one K-8 school, and one 9-12 school. Therefore, we are exempt. Okay, so you would type that in the comment box right here. Otherwise, you just put meets requirements if you haven't made any changes to your methodology, or you haven't added a campus to become a multi-site LEA. And going on to our comparability report, you may skip this item if you meet one of the following. So instead of looking at our required actions, I want those of you who are exempt to skip over this because it's going to be a little bit longer. If you only have one school in the LEA, so just like supplement, not supplant, if only one school in the entire LEA, skip this, go on to 46. If you only have one school per grade span, so that was also like supplement, not supplant. So one elementary, one middle school, one high school, skip this and go to the next item. And then there are some of you that have schools that have fewer than 100 students. Those schools can be excluded, but you still need to complete the comparability report. And unlike previous years, even if your district or multi-site charter is exempt, you must complete Form A of the comparability report. So if you've been exempted in years past, even though you have more than one school, but you had more than one school, and maybe you had only one school per grade span, you're going to need to fill out Form A of that new comparability report. So let's get into that comparability report by going to the Resources tab and then looking for the download new spreadsheet. It's the only Excel document there. Here is an example. Oh, excuse me, let me share my screen. Here's an example from Sevier School District. Now, this is not one that was submitted by Sevier. I took some data that from Sevier School District, and then I invented some data. So that's why it says for demonstration purposes only. Please indicate who it was prepared by. Sometimes it's the Title I director, sometimes it's the business administrator. So in case I have questions, especially since this is a new format, please include the email address. And then most LEAs are doing a really good job. There were several that didn't notice that you need to use a particular date between September 30th and October 31st in order to determine comparability. That's of the current year. If you don't measure your comparability until late November, those students in Title I schools, if they weren't comparable, have gone without the resources or FTEs that were comparable for more months than they should have. So that's why you need to select a date earlier in the year. Sevier happens to have 2 schools that have less than 100 students, so they exempt those 2 schools, mostly because the tiny schools cost more to operate, and so it might throw the comparability off. So Kusharam Elementary and Cedar Ridge High are listed here. And then the rest of the grade bands are split up. And this actually, let me change this to be more accurate, is K5 in Sevier. And then they also have 6, 9, I believe. I can't remember. I'm gonna have to look when I go to the next form. So you can separate your schools by grade span, or you can compare all your schools together. The reason that I think the federal government allows you to separate them by grade span, and why I recommend it, is because often it costs less to operate elementary schools than it does to operate high schools. So it may be impossible to demonstrate comparability. Again, remember, we're looking at how state and local funds are utilized here. We're not taking into account federal funds at all. So for all the schools that fall within the K5 grade span, Sevier has 4 Title I schools and 0 non-Title I schools. But they still need to do a comparability form, because even if you don't have non-Title I schools to compare them to, you still have to compare Title I schools to each other to make sure they're substantially comparable. Let's see, what else was I going to mention here? You can break schools down into smaller and larger schools only if the smaller school is half the size of the next largest school. And in this case, Sevier does not qualify to do that. So I just list them under larger. For 6, 9, so let's just call them middle grades, they have 3 non-Title I, but no Title I. Therefore, they do not need to fill out an additional form. They do need to fill out an additional form for the elementary schools, not for the middle schools and not for the high schools. Now, in this situation, they do have 2 smaller schools that are half the size of the larger school. So you can see how they differentiated. But that really doesn't matter because they have no Title I schools to compare it to. I remembered what I was going to say earlier, is that notice on this form, we're listing Title I schools first, non-Title I schools secondly. That's reverse order from the older form. So make sure you notice that up top. The total number of schools, so 4 plus 6 is 10, plus 2 exempted schools equal 12. What I do is I compare this document with the building eligibility form in Utah grants and make sure you have the same total number of schools, that all of them have been accounted for. So what to do when you have at least one yes, or for every yes you have. For every yes, you need to fill out an additional form. For LEAs with only Title I schools, you have your choice between Form B, if you want to compare staff and student ratio, or Form D, if you want to compare state and local expenses per pupil. If you have both Title I and non-Title I schools, then you're going to select Form C to compare student-staff ratio, or Form E if you want to compare state and local expenses per pupil. Okay, you need to, if you have more than one yes, then you need to make a copy of that form that you're going to use before you fill it out. Before you fill it out, makes it a lot easier, because then you don't have to delete information. And in the upcoming guide that's almost complete, I will show you how to make a copy of that, but just so you can see, I right click on whatever form I want to and copy it, and that will make an additional copy. But for severe, they usually compare state and local expenses, so I want Form D. I've gone ahead and completed this, filling out those 4 elementaries. And then column 2 actually asks for the grades, the actual grade span. And severe is organized a little differently than other LEAs. They have a K2 school, they have 2 K5 schools, and a 3-5 school. If you have schools in this situation where you're organized a little differently, if you have two grades that cross over with any other school, then you can go ahead and compare those. So I lumped them all together since the at least 2 grades cross over for each of these schools. And then you list the student enrollment for that date that you selected on the first page. And then since they're comparing per pupil allocation, on that, how much state and local funding was allocated to each of those schools. Notice there's an asterisk next to allocated. So I'm going to come down to the bottom, and that includes all technology, materials, and supplies. So general supplies for instruction, instructional media, textbooks, workbooks, computers, software, other technology, library books, and media center learning materials. Okay, all that kind of stuff, any budget for that has been paid out from state and local funds. List that budget here, and then the spreadsheet will automatically calculate the per pupil amount and determine whether it's comparable. I listed the grade span here. Again, I need to change that to K5 because I was wrong on the grade span. And I didn't choose a size grouping here just because that didn't pertain to severe. Okay, so since I only had 1 yes on Form A, I am finished because I completed that and all the schools were substantially comparable to each other. And so I am ready to upload this form. Go to All Documents, Attach, choose, and attach. Now I do want to show you one additional example of another LEA. This one is based on data from Murray School District plus made-up data. Again, make sure you put the contact information and name of the person that prepared it, as well as the date used. Murray does not have a school with fewer than 100 students, so none of them have been exempted here. In the K6 grade span, there is one smaller school that's half the size of the next larger school. So this Murray does qualify to separate it out by size if it chooses. There are 4 larger non-Title I schools. So for the larger K6 grade span, I'm going to have to complete at least another form. So far I need to complete at least 1 form. Murray does not allocate funding to its secondary schools, so I do not need to compare the junior high or the high schools. So I only need to complete 1 additional form. Remember, I need to make sure that the totals down here match the totals in Utah grants in the Title I application. Murray usually chooses to compare staff and student ratio, and since they have both Title I and non-Title I, this time I'm going to use Form C to demonstrate comparability for both Title I, non-Title I schools. So I come down here to Form C. I don't need to make a copy of it. And because I have a larger grade span, I marked larger here. I filled in K6 and then the actual grade span for each of these. I did add in that smaller school just so you could see how I determined smaller and larger. Notice how Liberty Elementary has 229, and then the next larger school, Parkside, has over double that amount. So Liberty does not need to be included in this. So Parkside and Horizon Elementary are being compared to the 4 non-Title I schools. Again, notice how this is flipped. We used to have non-Title I schools on the top and Title I schools at the bottom. So please be careful with that. I complete that information for both Title I and non-Title I schools. It automatically calculates the student-staff ratio and then determines up here whether the Title I schools are comparable. No comparison is needed down here for the non-Title I schools. Now for this one, the FTE of instructional staff also has an asterisk. So I come down here to the bottom. So including all instructional staff paid with state and local funds. So if you have somebody paid 0.5 out of Title I and 0.5 out of state and local funds, you can, since they're being paid out of state and local funds for part of their day. Include personnel such as instructional coaches, teachers, including music, art, PE, special ed, gifted, talented, long-term substitute teachers, counselors, social workers, speech therapists, librarians. And if the LEA includes FTEs of instructional paraprofessionals paid with state and local funds, count each full-time para as 0.5. Okay, that way you're not comparing paras and teachers equally. That wouldn't be fair to do. So whoever you count, whichever staff you count, for the Title I schools, you need to count for the non-Title I schools as well. And then just a reminder, you need to keep that supporting documentation for how you calculated this. You need to keep the FTE counts. You need to keep the student counts. You need to keep, for expenditures, you need to you need to keep any spreadsheets that show allocations to schools for monitoring purposes. So once you have that completed, and we only had one yes, so we only needed to complete that one form, then we're ready to upload that one as well. Since I already have one uploaded, you're not going to upload more than one workbook. Your workbook has multiple sheets, but you only need to upload one workbook. Then I'm not going to upload Murray's. I will change the status to meets requirements and go on to the next item, which is fiscal time and effort. So welcome back to those of you who skipped 45. On time and effort, remember last year was the first year you did not need to upload a blank time and effort sheet. You still do not need to upload anything, but you make an assurance that you have written policies and procedures for how you collect time and effort. Again, that's for time and effort for employees whose salaries are paid in whole or part with federal funds, or who are paid out of mascots, or a grant that has a match cost share requirement, even if the match is not paid with federal funds. Even though documentation is no longer required for this item, every time you submit reimbursement requests through Utah grants, you have to submit time and effort. So you need to make sure that your time and effort does effectively document that. And you will also be asked for time and effort during Title I monitoring visits. So as it's just an assurance, you can change the status to meets requirements and save. Going on to property records and equipment inventory. Something exciting, this is just an assurance, but something exciting, it may be exciting if your LEA is interested in increasing your your equipment capitalization threshold from what was the prior threshold from $5,000 to $10,000. The federal government made that increase this year. And so that will go into effect also in Utah grants. But if your LEA policy and procedures indicate that your equipment threshold is 5,000, then anything per unit that costs over 5,000 is considered equipment, and anything under 5,000 is considered supplies. And that if you were to increase that threshold to 10,000 in your policy, then what that would do is count anything under 10,000 as supplies and would create less burden on tracking, because you do have to, there's more burden on tracking equipment. So just to note that the Uniform Grants Guidance was updated this year. But you make an assurance that your written policies and procedures maintain ways of recording the records, those property records, as well as keeping inventory of the equipment purchased with, this says Title I funds, but in essence, it's federal funds. So if you purchased any equipment with ESSER funds, you should have maintenance, you should have, policies and procedures for equipment inventory. As a assurance, I just need to change this to meets requirements and save it. And go on to the audit. This is a new change as well. If you remember prior, if your LEA received total $750,000 in federal funds or more, then you were required to have a single audit. Now, single audits are much more detailed than the fiscal audits. The single audit covers the entire organization's financial operations. And so maybe this saves you from having to have a single audit. Maybe you get under $1 million now, and you can just do the fiscal audit. Okay, so going up from $750,000 to $1 million now is that distinction. All LEAs receiving Title I funds must have a yearly audit. It's just whether you have to have that more detailed single audit or whether you can have the fiscal audit. So you make an assurance, yes, we do have an audit. We have the correct audit every year. And going on to the last item, procurement and expenditures. You're just making an assurance that you have written policies and procedures. All these written policies and procedures are required when you get monitored. So even though you don't have to upload them here, you will be required to upload them for monitoring purposes. You change that to meets requirements and save. And now when I go back to the annual core items, I should have a submit button, but I don't. What happened? Okay, one way to figure out if you don't have a submit button is come over to the status and notice if any of them have not been changed. Oh, the comparability report did not get changed. I changed it, but I did not save it. So when I save it, I come back to annual core, and I now have that button. Remember, you click it once, confirm instrument status change. I need to submit again. And once I do, I now have 14 that I changed the meets requirements and 0 in progress. Now, this second set over here is when I go through it. If any of them come back and they don't meet requirements or they need further action, you'll notice that up here. You'll also see in the status that it's been submitted. Let's go back to the overview page, and you can also see that the status is submitted. We need to start on our cycle 1 because it's still in progress. So clicking on cycle 1, we're taking again to the criteria questions. This asks, what type of programs do the schools in your LEA operate? Do they operate school-wide programs, or do they operate targeted assistance programs? Just a reminder, targeted assistance programs are not the same as targeted support and improvement schools, TSI schools. Please don't let that confuse you. When Title I directors come in here trying to answer that, sometimes they think, well, we're school-wide, but we're also targeted support. And so we're going to answer both of them yes. Only answer what type of Title I program you operate. If you can't remember, what could you do to figure that out? Or if you're new and you're not sure, well, you can go to, let's go to the overview and change to last year, update it, and go to the cycle, go to the criteria questions. Oh, yes, we're school-wide, we're not a targeted assistance. Okay, now I've got it. Go back to the overview, change it back to this year, update it, and now you're ready to answer the questions. We are a school-wide and not a targeted assistance. But of course, I need to answer yes to both for demonstration purposes. Once again, you're going to expand all. We have 2 categories in Cycle 1 and fewer items to respond to. The cycle instrument is much shorter than the annual core. So we have the LEA plan, and we have qualifications for teachers and paras. So for the LEA plan, you're going to need to answer 1 item. And then if you're a school-wide program, you're going to need to answer 2 additional items. So you'll have 3 total. If you're targeted assistance, you'll have equitable access to effective teachers plus 3 more. Okay, so you'll have 4. Let's start with equitable access to effective teachers. The requirement here is to provide the policy, procedures, or a summary. You don't have to do all of them. You can just do 1 of them, showing how the LEA identifies and addresses any disparities that result in low-income students and minority students being taught at higher rates than their peers by ineffective, inexperienced, or out-of-field teachers. Now, of course, the statute is written in the most confusing way possible. So basically what we're looking for is, how does your LEA ensure that you identify and address, or ensure, let me just say, ensure that students experiencing poverty and minority students are taught at the same or higher rates by effective, experienced, and state qualified teachers. So that's another way. How do you ensure that happens? So your responses can be completed in one of 2 ways. You can type your response in the LEA comment box. Obviously, that would be the summary, because it would be a lot easier to upload the policy or procedures. Or you can upload the documentation. Here's a sample response that I've included just to give you an idea of what I'm looking for, and it's not necessarily for you to copy. Our LEA Student Achievement Committee meets 4 times a year to analyze disaggregated student data and make staffing recommendations. Our LEA administrative policy requires the most effective principals be placed in our most at-risk schools to better support teachers and the school community as a whole. Title I schools and non-Title I schools with TSI groups are prioritized when filling teacher vacancies. We provide 2 additional paid training opportunities for teachers in Title I schools focused on evidence-based practices. Our Title I schools have their own instructional coaches who complete a minimum of at least 2 coaching cycles with the teachers, and any teachers in their first 3 years at a Title I school or a non-Title I TSI school is provided with extra coaching cycle. Why TSI? Well, TSI, schools are identified as TSI because of those student groups, whether they're economically disadvantaged or whether they're one of the minority groups. So you're going to upload whatever your documentation is or comment in the box below. There are some additional resources. I do have a sample LEA policy and procedures if you want to look over that. That's what I'm going to upload. And I also gathered a collection of abstracts that are about equitable distribution of teachers. What are research-based strategies that have been proven effective to increase equitable access to those teachers? So you can find all of those under the resources tab. Let me go ahead and edit. So I'm choosing to upload a document, so I won't write the summary in the comments, but if you choose to write that summary, this is where it goes. Meets requirements. And let's see, all documents to upload. District policy and procedures for equitable teacher distribution. So I will attach that. And coming down, I can see that it's successfully attached. Here's that sample district policy and procedures. So you can see the policy statement and then the procedures listed. Reading over the procedures might give you some ideas of, oh yes, that's one thing we do, or that's something we could do. Let's add that to our procedures. Okay, so again, just as a sample for your reference. This item is ready to go since I changed the status and I uploaded that document, and I'm off to the next item. Now, this is for school-wide programs. If you do not have school-wide programs, skip to the next item for targeted assistance qualified teachers. So in this required action, you are to provide the policy procedures and again, a summary, so one of those three, showing how the LEA ensures all teachers in Title I school programs are state qualified. So unlike targeted assistance schools, school-wide programs need to ensure that all teachers have one of three license levels and are listed in Cactus as USOE. It's the old term. Instead of USBE, it's USOE qualified. So they have a professional license, an associate license, or LEA specific license. And next to, are they USOE qualified? It indicates yes, they are. So additional resources there. Let me just show you under resources. There's the Pathways to a Utah Educator link to the USBE webpage. There are sample LEA procedures for ensuring qualified teachers that you might want to look over. There's the USBE licensing overview infographic showing the three levels, the educator licenses, the license areas and areas of concentration, as well as the endorsements. And then the link to the handbook. So once you have your policy procedures or a summary, you can upload it, or in the case of a summary, cut and paste it here. And I'm going to upload a document. In case you wanted to see what those sample procedures for ensuring qualified teachers look like, I've listed those here. So again, you can get ideas to add to your policy and procedures. Just another sample. Let's change the status from in progress to meets requirements and go to the next item. If you only have school-wide programs, you can skip this item and the next item and go to school-wide paraprofessionals. For Schools with that are operating a targeted assistance program, the LEA needs to ensure that all teachers providing instruction as part of the Title I Targeted Assistance Program, okay, however you're using your funding, whether that's for literacy or for math, whatever teachers are providing instruction as part of that, they need to be state qualified, meaning they have one of 3 licenses and they show up in Cactus as USOE. It's the old term, instead of USBE, it's USOE qualified. So they have a professional license, an associate license, or an LEA specific license. And next to their USOE qualified, it says yes, next to their name. So in order to provide the policy procedures or a summary of how you ensure that, you can type your responses in the LEA comment box below, or you can upload the policy or procedures. Under the resource tab, I have included procedures for ensuring qualified teachers in Title I schools, just in case you want to look for potential ways that you can add to what you're doing currently. To upload a document, I'm going to go to the plus sign, attach, choose my file, and select that and attach it. Now, if I want to type in my summary, I just click that edit button and add comments to the SEA. Change the status to meets requirements and save. And moving on, this is for schools operating targeted assistance programs. Another required action, this time, you're going to complete the highly qualified paraprofessional form, and that's found under the resource tab below. This is even for LEAs with schools that operate a targeted assistance program that don't use their Title I funds for paraprofessionals. I still want you to complete the first question. Okay, so let's go ahead and find that form. That's the one that says complete down, complete on it. And I'm going to download that. In this particular form, you're being asked several questions. In the targeted assistance program, how does the LEA ensure, let's see, for LEAs with targeted assistance schools that do not use Title I funding, please answer the first question only. Do the TA schools in your LEA use Title I funding for instructional paraprofessionals? Most of you will answer yes. There might be 1 or 2 that answer no, but the majority of our LEAs are using Title I funds for some of their, to pay some of their paraprofessionals. And then how does your LEA ensure that? Why did that disappear? Oh, I know why. Let me download that and then grab the one that I have completed. Okay, now this one, because I downloaded it to my computer, I was able to make the check mark and move on to number 2 without that going away. Then if you mark no, then you're finished. You just need to upload this form with the 1 check, done. If you do use funding for Title I paraprofessionals, how does your LEA ensure that they are highly qualified? Remember, highly qualified could be they have an associate degree or higher, and you have documentation of that, or they have they passed at least 48 semester hours at a college or university that's accredited. Or if they don't have the higher ed requirements, that they have passed one of the board approved assessments. So you write in your response in here. This is a sample response. Our HR department is responsible for maintaining the records of the highly qualified status of paraprofessionals prior to working with students. Any paraprofessional not highly qualified through their higher education experience is required to complete the project para coursework and assessment. So what in this answer, they essentially answered number 3. For some reason, an instructional paraprofessional paid with Title I funds is not qualified through having an associate degree or higher, or at least 48 semester hours. What board-approved assessment does your LEA use? The Parapro by ETS, the Paraeducator by Master Teacher, Project Para by the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, or other? And then finally, how do you maintain those records at the LEA? Our HR department scans all documentation that shows the highly qualified status of our paraprofessionals. These records are kept in each employee's file, and they're available for monitoring purposes. Okay, so once you have that complete, you save that so it's ready to upload. Going to the All Documents tab, I'm going to find that form I just filled out and upload it and attach it. Now, if you have just targeted assistance programs, you can skip this item and go to the last item. For those LEAs with school-wide programs, you need to complete the highly qualified paraprofessional form that's found under the Resources tab. So it is this first one listed here. You're going to download that, but I already have it completed, so I'll show you what that looks like. So just a reminder, all instructional paraprofessionals, no matter whether they're part of the Title I program, whether that's Tier 2, Tier 3 interventions, or whether they work with students with IEPs, any paraprofessional needs to be highly qualified in a school-wide school. So the first question is, how does your LEA ensure that all instructional paraprofessionals are highly qualified? Okay, remember that means they have an associate degree or higher, they've passed at least 48 semester hours or more at an accredited college or university, or if they don't have those higher ed requirements, they haven't met those, they can take one of the board-approved assessments. And once they pass that, then they're highly qualified. So in this sample LEA, prior to hiring paraprofessionals, our HR department requests documentation of the candidate's higher ed diplomas and transcripts. If the candidate does not have the requisite education, they're required to take and pass the paraeducator assessment prior to being employed. Our LEA covers the cost of the assessment for any paras needing to take it. So they answered that second question in this text box. They use the paraeducator by master teacher. If you use the Parapro, you would check the first box. If you use Project Para by University of Nebraska at Lincoln, you would check the third box. And if you do something different, you would check other. How are the records demonstrating the highly qualified status of instructional paraprofessionals maintained at the LEA and or schools? Well, it's probably best to keep it at the LEA level. That way, if any paras transfer to a different school, those records are there and you know. Sometimes paras from a non-Title I school transfer to a Title I school, and people lose track of whether they're highly qualified or not. So the district HR department scans all highly qualified documentation and keeps it with the paraprofessional's employment file at the district office. Okay, when you have that complete and you're ready to upload it, you're going to come to the edit, excuse me, you're not going to come to the edit, you're going to come to the all documents, click on attach, choose your file, and we're getting close to the end because that's the last attachment. Okay, so I know it's been uploaded and I'm going to change that status to meets requirements and save it. If for some reason you don't meet requirements and you need to get something in place, you can definitely mark does not meet requirements and save it and submit that. Obviously, you would need to get that into compliance before December 1st when this is due. This last item is only for LEAs with targeted assistance schools. So those with just school-wide programs, you are finished. You should have a submit button. If you don't, then make sure you troubleshoot. This last one is just an assurance. And for targeted assistance programs, since the paras that are paid in part or in whole with Title I funds can only work with those students identified for interventions during the time that they're paid out of Title I funds, the paras are paid out of Title I funds, then this particular situation may come into play. So occasionally, paras are tasked with non-instructional activities, such as recess duty or lunch duty or bus duty. So this is an assurance that the amount of time a Title I funded paraprofessional spends on limited, that's the key word, limited, non-Title I activities, duties beyond the classroom instruction that don't benefit participating children. That time does not exceed in the same proportion the time that non-Title I personnel are putting in doing that same activity. So the purpose of Title I paraprofessionals is to provide services to identified students. It's not to be doing lunch duty, it's not to be doing recess duty, and it's not to be doing bus duty. However, they could do that on a limited basis. So your assurance is that they don't spend more time than non-Title I instructional aides on those activities. Okay, so since it's an assurance, all you need to do is change that to meets requirements and save it. And going back to our cycle 1, we don't have a submit button because I somehow forgot again to change the status. So meets requirements and save it. Now I should see that submit button, which I do. Change to submit. And now if I go back to the LEA overview, I can see both of those are submitted. Now, once it comes to me at the state level, I review all those items, and then I mark any one of them, like I mentioned before, if it's not in compliance or if it needs further evidence, I mark that not in compliance and it comes back to you automatically. So you would look here which ones are not in compliance. And then you can also go to the item to see which ones are marked not in compliance by me. Once I send it back, you can't see it at this point. Another thing you can do is look at the LEA filing cabinet and see all those documents that have been uploaded. Just another thank you for spending the time to go through this training, and some reminders that if you have questions after watching this or after experimenting in the DMI, come to the Title I Directors meeting on September 27th for the office hours held at the end of the meeting, where I will answer your specific LEA questions. You can share your screen if you want. We can discuss different things. It's not a training, so don't come there expecting me to walk you through all of this information again. However, there is a training for new Title I directors during our October meeting scheduled for October 22nd. Again, if for some reason we have to swap the topics and switch out our Title I application and put it back to October 22nd, then the DMI information will be provided during our September meeting. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all you do, and I wish you the best year yet.